Let's just start. What year were you over in Vietnam, Rick?
I was there the year of '67. I got there January 1st and left December 29th.
And you were with the Marines.
Marines.
Which Marine division, outfit, regiment? What were you with?
I was in India Company, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines.
What was your MOS? What was your job?
I was in 0311 Infantry.
What kind of M16? Is that what you guys carried?
Not when I first got there. We had M14s. And then I think in March we got the M16s.
What was the difference?
Weight mostly,
Right.
and the magazines were a little smaller, so you could carry more of them. The other thing is, they had trouble with them with the shells getting caught in the chamber and wouldn't eject. It would peel off a piece of the shell, so you had to keep it real clean, in order to make sure it fired. But I fired hundreds of rounds through mine, and just to make sure it didn't jam.
So what, you're 19, 20 years old?
19, yeah.
And you're over in Vietnam. What do you remember about the first time you went in country? What it felt like, what it smelled like? What do you remember about getting off that plane?
Well, I went over by ship.
Okay.
So that ate up almost 30 days of my overseas time. So I didn't have to actually spend but 12 months in country. But we went to Hawaii and pulled in Pearl Harbor, turned around and left, went to Okinawa, staged a sea bag, and then 5 more days to Da Nang. And I can remember going into like this town square and all the little kids coming up wanting either cigarettes or candy. And the first thing I learned was Didi, which means get the hell out of here in Vietnamese. So it was like a strong get out of here. So if you didn't like them bothering me, you say Didi, and that, and it just, you thought it was a third world country or something.
So you're the first time in Vietnam. You're a young man. You're in a combat situation. Did you ever feel like you were invincible, like nothing could ever happen to me? Do young people think like that?
No, I didn't feel that way at all. I was there to survive. Once I found out, when I joined the Marines, once I got on those yellow footprints at San Diego, I knew I had messed up. But I said, okay, here I am for 2 years. Do whatever you want, but when I get out, I'm getting out. And I never felt invincible.
So when you get to Vietnam, what are your thoughts? I mean, they get you in, or you're in a unit, and then I'm assuming eventually you're going to go out on patrols, or what kind of work did you do there?
Well, from the point in Da Nang, they told you where your company was going to be, and I happened to go to Hill 65 south of Da Nang, and they dropped us off at Hill 55 first in order to get our equipment and our combat gear and all that before we went out to Hill 65. And I remember on Hill 55, all those guys there had full combat gear to stand inspections, and I went out to the field with a M14, 1 magazine, a flak jacket, some jungle boots, and a helmet. And the other thing I remember is they showed a movie, Green Beret, which I thought was pretty strange. Here you are in Vietnam seeing a movie about Vietnam, and you're just first there, And then they sent us on out to Hill 65, and you're assigned a platoon, and then you have a squad in that platoon, and you have a fire team. And, first thing you're thinking is, I want to go home. I don't want to be here. But you're thinking, God, I don't have the right to say that, because look at all these guys that have already been here. And I'm looking, oh my God, I got a year ahead of me. And So from that point on, basically my job was to go on patrols, ambushes, and operations, and they all varied in length and time. Patrols were usually in the daytime, and it could be all day. Ambushes, usually you go out at 8 at night and come in at 12, or go out at 12 and come in at 8. Operations were usually more than one day or one night. It was like 2 or 3 days. And one operation I went on, Operation Desoto, was 90-day operation.
So just tell me a little bit about, the combat or whatever, encountering the enemy. I'm assuming you're fighting North Vietnamese, Viet Cong?
Well, VC mostly when I first got there. And they hadn't had any casualties in that company for about 6 or 7 months. In the first little operation I went on, we lost 4 guys. And it was just basically a sweep where we were lined up and just walking through the jungle. And we caught a couple VC in a boat, and they jumped out on the other side of the riverbank, and I can remember shooting at them, but I don't know that we killed them or even hit them. But that's mainly, and then you go out at night, like at 8 and 12, you always have the risk of walking into one of their ambushes. So, and the same way, going out at 12 and coming in at 8. I mean, you're sitting there, it's quiet, nobody smokes, nobody does anything. The radio, you get a radio check, and you just click the headset a couple times, and that means that everything's okay. And you get one of those about every hour, and then you come back in, and the rest of the time you're on the hill, you're living in a hole in the ground or a bunker, and then you've got, whenever you're there, you're standing hole watch at night. So that's where usually there's 2 of you standing hole watch, and that's when you really get to know each other, and it's like you know each other's lifetime story, and yet it's like you just met them, but for some reason the fear and your life depends on them, and their lives depend on you. So it's like you get to really know each other, but you have to be careful because that guy might be gone the next day, and you just, it's like a light friendship that you know everything about the guy, but you don't. It's like you have to be careful because if they're gone, you can't sit around and think about them being gone, or you're going to be gone. So
tell me about some of the maybe the more difficult things that you had to do or that you saw in Vietnam, and if you've lost any friends or buddies along the way, were you able to help them, and what happened?
Well, I can tell you the worst. Operation Desoto was a 90-day operation. It was in the Central Highlands. They were offering us piasters the night before because we were going to run out of food and have to buy food from the people. And I wrote home and told my friend, I said, don't look for me to come back, because I felt like it was a mission that was, you'd be lucky if you survived it. Well, they dumped us in by these grasshopper helicopters, which are 2 large props. They look like a grasshopper, and then the rear comes down. They just brought us in to the rice paddy dike and lowered the rear end, and we just came running out, and we were getting shot at the whole time coming in. And then once everybody landed, then with all the chaos and stuff, it took about an hour to kind of settle down. And then we got together and started to patrol and start a movement. And we received fire on the right flank, and my squad leader, it was his second time over there, and he started fire team rushes, which is something, you just don't do, I mean, anyway, he was gung-ho, and we started rushing this bunker that we found, and we were shooting at it. Well, there was an L-shaped dike, and I couldn't see those guys on the right side, and I didn't hear him say move out or anything, so I look around, and I'm there by myself, and they're stopping. They say, "Hey, coach, come on," So I'm running back, and I could just, you got 80 pounds of gear, and you're running in rice paddy water and mud, and I could just feel bullets coming in my back, but luckily it didn't happen, and we went on in. Well, we camped that night, and while we were camping in, digging a foxhole, setting up a perimeter, there was a lady standing out in the rice paddy dike, and we were just aiming in on her just, for something to do when we got ready to dig in. Well, now we wish we would have shot her because she was lining up mortars on us. And that night, one mortar hit right in front of us and one hit right in the middle of the compound. And so like I say, we wish we would have shot her. But anyway, the next day we got up to move out, and I have pictures, but there's probably close to a half mile of open rice paddy dike going into a little mountainous, little hill-like mountain. Now, the reason we were there is because there was a huge mountain right in the center of this big valley, and there was like mountains to the, I guess it would be the east of us, and then the ocean was on the west of us. And the reason we were there is because that whole hill had Vietnam soldiers that were not communist, and they would try to come off of that hill to get supplies, and every time they did, they would get shot or killed, and so they were pretty much stuck on that hill, and our job was to come in and clean that out there so that they could get their supplies and things like that. But back to the rice paddy dike, I'd like to say that, for 30, 40 years, I never talked about it. Once in a while, I'd run across a Marine or somebody, and I asked them if they heard of Operation Desoto. No, I'd never heard of it. And I'm going, I'm beginning to believe that it never happened, And so, to make a long story short, I'll go back to the dike, but I was looking in the VFW, I saw my company had a reunion, and I went to it. When I went to the reunion, that's all everybody was talking about was the dike. So it was like, it was like coming home or something, or it's like, it proved to myself that it did happen, and they were all there, and they all had their stories about what happened that day. I'm getting ready to go to reunion again, and I don't have to say nothing. They don't have to say nothing. It's just nice being with them because they were there the same time I was.
Oh, yeah.
And but anyway, back to the dike. We got stretched out. Our whole company got stretched out on this dike, and right in the middle, I was right behind the captain and his entourage, which is 2 or 3 radio men and that kind of thing. And the Vietnamese had a 50 caliber plus up on this hill, and they opened up on us. And so we would, lay a bunch of fire down and that stuff. We get up to move, while, they'd open up on us again. And this went on all morning, and we were the captain was calling in airstrikes. I could hear him talking to the pilots, And we even had naval gunfire. We had artillery up on this hill, and there were chunks of shrapnel like the size of this chair landed around in different spots, and I thought, geez, some of our guys are getting killed from our own stuff, you know. So anyway, about 2 that afternoon, the group that was in the front closest to the hill where the enemy was were wearing thin, and so they asked for new troops. Well, me and a guy in my squad, Moose, started to move up to the front, and the first thing they did is pass off this black guy named Estes, who was dead. And we had to crawl on our hands and knees and drag him, and then crawl on our hands and knees and drag him back. And all we had was about a foot-high rice paddy dike for cover, you know. So, you know, it was very difficult. But once we got him back, then we moved on up. Well, there was a squad of men that had worked their way up that hill, and they were pretty much pinned down in there. And in the transition, there was like maybe 7 of us up there that we had to go in and get those guys. But we thought, well, let's see if we can get some help. So we sent a guy back to where the captain was and to get some help from the second squad. And nobody came up. So that just left us to get those guys out. And I was supposed to, my job was to make cover fire. Well, you know, there were machine gun barrels, you know, with asbestos gloves laying around and rifles laying around and all kind of crap laying all over this little dike that came to a T before you went up to the mountain. And I was supposed to provide cover fire. Well, I had to take my canteen and pour it in the chamber to wash the dirt out of it. This is when we're carrying M14s. Just to get one shell in and fire. And then I'd have to put the rifle down here and kick it with my foot, the chamber, to open the chamber to put it one more round in and fire. And I thought, I'm not doing anything. So I threw the rifle down and I went in to start to help. And the first guy we got was Sergeant Holloway. And he's a blue-eyed American guy from Hawaii. I mean, the perfect Marine. And he had a bullet right in his head and right in his forehead. And we drug him, and because we were under fire, and he was already dead, we just threw him over the rice paddy dike. And when we did, I seen the back of his head, and it looked like, you know, a basketball with a chunk cut out of it. You could look right in his head, and rice paddy water, and crap was running right in the back of his head, and that's something I carry with me all my life. You know, I mean, that's something I carry with me all the time, and it's like, what a waste. You know, here's a guy that's a beautiful guy, you know, and it just so inhumane. It's just awful, you know. So then anyway, after that, we started getting the guys out of there, and there was like 3 that never got anything as far as being wounded. There was probably 4 guys that were wounded in one manner or another, and then the rest, which was 4 or 5 guys, were dead. And so all the rest, by that time it was getting evening, and we started getting rounds from the rear. And so all we did the rest of the time was haul these guys just over this rice paddy dike clear back to the point where we had helicopters coming in to evacuate them out of there. And you know what they say about dead weight, we'd put one dead guy in a poncho, and 4 of us, it was a tremendous struggle to carry that body, you know, a quarter mile or so back to where it was. But we did that till about 1 o'clock at night, dragging people back. And I don't expect anybody to believe this story, but I hadn't seen it. I wouldn't have believed it myself. But one of my fire team guys and I was bringing a guy back that was wounded, and we put him on the chopper. And about that time, my Bruce gets his boot knocked off, and his foot is swollen way up. And I looked over there, and the boot was still laced up. Now, ask me how that happened. And like I say, I don't expect anybody to believe it, but I saw it, and so. But anyway, so I had to take Bruce and put him on the chopper. And when you're there, you smell like oil and American, like grease and oil from the chopper, and it's like reminds you of home. And man, you wanted to get on there so bad and just get the hell out of there. But I couldn't because there wasn't nothing wrong with me. And so then the rest of the bodies we just threw in a hut in one of them hooches, and it was piled up probably at least 6 foot tall with guys you knew from yesterday, and it's at night and you're just seeing a pile of bodies, and that's something else that I live with every day. I mean, these are human beings that you knew, and they're just laying there in a pile, It's such a waste.
Well, Rick, seeing that, living through that, coming home, obviously you have felt some survivor's guilt. Why did I make it?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So how do you cope with that at the time, or do you think about that later?
Well, I didn't know what it was. Nobody knew anything about PTSD when we came home. It was always shell shock, or that's what they called it in World War II and stuff. And that's what's wrong with Vietnam veterans, is they all have PTSD. Well, the ones that at least seen some combat, and we didn't know anything about it. We knew I knew there's something wrong with my life, but I could never put my finger on it, And when I did go to the wall, my brother took me over there, and every name that I could remember, because you don't really remember a lot of names because it was either Sparky or some name other than their full name, but the people I could remember, their full name was on that wall. And I was getting ready to leave the wall, and I stopped, and it just hit me. I said, if everybody I know is on that wall, then why in the hell isn't my name on that wall? What makes me so special? And that's survivor guilt. You just wonder, why did you survive and these guys didn't? I don't know the answer. Either God, or you're lucky, or a combination of everything, or whatever. It's just that somehow you made it and they didn't.
Wow. I've got a lot of questions. It's like just thinking about what you're saying. Tell me, let's kind of maybe digress a bit. Just the helicopters. You mentioned, were they Huey helicopters, or what kind of helicopters did you guys use there?
There was everything. They used Hueys to bring mail in. See, after we got pinned down, we lost over half of our company. So they put us up on that mountain, the one we came there to rescue. And we sat up there until we got our wounded back that could come back, or fresh troops, before we could start operating again. Well, something that we found out is they had planted 10,000 mines on that whole mountain, and they never chartered one of them. So we're setting up outposts about halfway down the mountain, and they had these Bangalore torpedoes that are supposed to rip through rock and everything, and they'd clear an area so that you could go in there and set up whatever you're going to set up, but just mainly to stand hull watch and guard if anybody is trying to come up, the enemy. Well, we're digging this latrine, and this guy named Combat Ready, his name was Ed, and we call him combat ready because he was one of those guys that when you stood hole watch with him, he would say, I don't want to die over here. If I have to die, I'd rather do it in the States. I just don't want to die over here. And you're going, well, no shit. Who the hell does, But he was just had that nervous energy that he just had to keep talking about it. And before every ambush or patrol, he'd be ready 45 minutes ahead, and that's why we called him combat ready, because he had his gear all on and stuff ready to go 45 minutes ahead of time to go. And anyway, he was with me, and we were digging this latrine, and it was my turn, so I took the shovel from him and started digging, and he goes over and throws his flak jacket down to set between these two rocks, and he threw it right on top of a tomato can, which is a mine that has a first explosion that kicks it up about a foot off the ground, and then it has a secondary explosion, and it just sheared him off right at the waist. And he weighed about 50 pounds, and we took him down to the helicopter, to the helicopter, the medevac. And so he's gone, and we're sitting there, and we look up, and up on a rock about 25 yards away is a big hunk of flesh. Whether it was his leg, his butt, or what, I don't know, laying up there. And it's like you wanted to go get it and bury it, but nobody was going to walk, take a chance of walking on one of the mines he just got killed with, And it was a awful, weirdest feeling, because you'd go to work and you'd catch yourself staring at it again like it was going to go away, or like, is that really what I think it is, And you knew it was, but it just, you'd be working to try to forget about it, and it was like just pulling you to make you look at it, it was sickening. But anyway, and we lost a lot of guys up on that hill because we had two things we had to do. We had to come down to the landing area 4 or 5 times a day and carry water or sea rations or mail up to this point. I mean, with all your gear on, you'd run out of breath very easily just walking down there without carrying anything. And then you had to carry it back up, and that labor was so hard. The other job was we would go out with snipers out on the finger of this mountain and just fire at anything down there that was moving. And we were losing somebody every day out there with a booby trap or something almost every day, and it got to the point where you'd rather go out there and take a chance of getting blown up than having to do all that work, because it was work. You're climbing up mountains with stuff in your hands, plus your gear, plus you're worried about getting shot at, And one time we went out on this finger, and we basically were security for the snipers as infantrymen. And I took these two snipers, and we were gonna found us a spot to sit at, and then we'd use binoculars to look down the valley and see if we could find anything. And we're sitting there, and I have one on this side and one on this side. And the one on this side, I said, don't move. I said, look about 6 inches down from the top of the barrel of your rifle. And they looked there, and there was like a piece of fish wire going across there. And it was already taut from where the rifle was laying on it. So he said, let's back out of here. And we backed out of there, and the engineers came over, and sure enough, there was a Russian Chicom grenade that was tied to it. And that's what I consider another one of my 9 lives, I mean, I've had plenty of chances to not be here, but anyway, that's kind of what was going on the top of that mountain, and we, eventually got off of there, and there's another quick story I'll tell you while we're on that mountain. Is they had a round called a Beehive Round. It's an air burst, and it shoots out all these little needles and stuff just in a big old circumference, and it's an air burst. Well, they wanted us to test it out on a body, or go. So our job, they were going to shoot where somebody was, and it was our job to go get the body so they could see what it did to it. Well, we go down into the jungle, and we're keeping people out of the area. I don't know, but it was so thickly vegetated, the squad leader sent me and this other guy up and said, see if you can find a place to put the machine gun. We went up there. There was no place to put the machine guns because it was so thickly vegetated. I said, go back and tell him there's no place to put it. That guy went back, and a minute later, I hear this thunk, and I look over and I see the grenade, and it went off, and it was within 30 meters, and the killing radius is like 60. And I've got a little piece of shrapnel in my shoulder I've carried all these years, and underneath my watch somehow there was a piece of shrapnel, and I was looking myself over going, and my ears are pounding, and I'm looking myself over, I said, damn, I'm not dead, I'm not wounded. I couldn't believe it, so I got ready I took a hand grenade, and I was getting ready to throw it back over toward that area where I thought it came from, and I thought, crap, they've had time to throw another one. So I put it back and started running, and finally I was catching up to the squad leader, and they stopped and they go, where's Coach? And I said, no shit, motherfucker, because they could have left me up there. I'd still be up there. But anyway, there was a guy that had gotten hit that day, and he was really badly wounded, and we had to make a stretcher, so I took a K-bar and just cut out 2 pieces of bamboo for, the side to carry, the poles to carry, and we put a poncho over it. And I ain't kidding you, that was rough work. I don't know if you ever cut down any bamboo, but that stuff's hard and thick, and it's got things on it. And I'm hacking away because I'm trying to save this guy's life, And anyway, we got it on there, got him on the stretcher, and took him back, and it was so rough and hilly, we dropped him a couple times, but he was still alive, and when we put him on the chopper, he was alive. And then he dies on the way to the hospital. And, it's just very, it's like, what the hell is this shit all about anyway, But anyway, that's some of the things that happened around there. And then once we got all of our guys back, and we went out on another operation, and next thing we get pinned down again, and we're going across this river, John Wayne style. You got water up to your chest, and you got your rifle over your head shooting in the direction that you think the enemy's shooting at you from. And we came on this river bank, and it was so high that you could hardly get out of there, and we were freaking out because we were getting shot at, and we can't get out of the water. But anyway, basically, we just patrolled, and I remember one time we were bitching because it was so hard to dig a hole at night. Well, about that time, we got 2 rounds that came in toward us, and we didn't have any trouble digging after that. We were digging away. But that's basically, but that was 90 days of doing this. And the other thing is I was only 3 weeks old when that happened in country. So nobody knew me, and I didn't know anybody. And they didn't want to know me because I was brand new. When you're new, you don't know if a guy's going to run or what he's going to do. So when I got to the reunion, hell, nobody knew me, And I felt like I was, new again. Here it is 40 years later, and I'm still being the new guy, But after I told a couple stories, these guys knew that I had to be there because the stories that I told, one story was this guy, little redheaded guy I went through boot camp with, and he got shot in the foot, and the bullet hit a rock and went back up his leg. Well, the corpsman that put him on that chopper, I was telling him this story, and he says, that was me that put him on the chopper. So that verified that, that I was there. And a couple other things. And like I say, everybody else has got their stories too. But, you know, if you were there, then you're the only one that knows, and that's what's nice about having a reunion is that you're with guys that know. Because you can never tell that to someone that wasn't there.
Rick, why do you think you cut out the article and called me and wanted to talk with me today?
Because it's pathetic what they have in the schools. As far as you might see 2 paragraphs on Vietnam, and we lost 58,000 guys over there, and not many people know it, but there's another 58 that have committed suicide since they've been back. And that seems like a lot, but there's actually more than that. And people need to know that I was a dumb farm kid from Kansas, and apple pie and mom and all this crap, and I was going over there to stop communism so that everybody could have their freedom over here to bitch and gripe or do whatever they want, but they have the freedom to do it. And that's what thought I was defending, And then, like I say, once I got into boot camp, and then you're over there and you're hearing about protests and all this stuff that, you really know you screwed up, but it was too late, and you're in the middle of it, and you were making history. You weren't, reading about it, but that history is gone. It's practically gone, and I just think of what's going on. It's the same thing with Iraq now. These are bright, intelligent, strong American young kids, just like I was, and just like Sergeant Holloway was, that are just being wasted, And I read somewhere war doesn't decide who's right, only who's left. And that's about it. But I mean, how much better would our country be if those people were still alive? How many presidents do we have there? How many John Kerrys? Or, how many scientists? How many people could have stopped the nuclear proliferation? And, it's just, people need to know that we're humans. And we're your neighbor. And like when we come back, it was like, get the hell away from me, or spit in your face, or you're not going to wear that uniform to the baseball game, are you? And it was awful, because I was one of those guys that I wanted a ticker tape parade like they in New York, and some appreciation. And it isn't until now that I'm getting it, And then it's from other veterans mostly. It's not really, maybe your relatives, but, the public in general, it's like the kids today never even heard of the Beatles, and that's just dying away, and that's why I appreciate what you're doing, because it's keeping it alive, and to let people know that we were there for them. We were in service for the people that, that live here in this country.
That's right. You think the thanks is too late?
Well, it's never too late, because it makes me feel good, like I'm in charge of the wall committee. We have our own little wall at Chapter 23, Vietnam Veterans Chapter, and we took it out to the Indian reservation, and those Indians were in Vietnam too, and they're really appreciative. after the meeting, everybody all the veterans got in a circle, and all the people came around and shook our hands. You know, you felt like a politician at the end of it because you shook so many hands, but it was people just saying thank you, you know, and for what you did. And, you know, first of all, I'm not a military type person. And like I said, I was in there 2 years, and most of the other Marines said, well, you got to be in for at least 3 or 4 years. Well, at that time, they were taking anybody on any circumstances just to get them over there. And I was only in 2 years. So, like I say, when I got out, I got out. And I went to 2.5 years of college straight at Wichita State University. And eventually, I was carrying 16 hours in college and 40 hours a week working at the post office, and I still had time to go out and drink and chase women. And in the end, the drinking and the chase women started taking over, and pretty soon I was in full addiction. And I mean, the 60s never really hit Kansas till the 70s, but you know, I was in the thick and the throw of it all, and I felt like, well, you know, you don't appreciate what I did, so I'm going to give my life to you as a junkie and an alcoholic here, you know. And I drank and drugged probably for 25, 30 years just trying to get rid of this shit. But fortunately, when I was 41, I just looked around and I said, my brother and my sister have houses and cars and this and that, and I don't have anything. So I went and got help, and now I've been in AA for 20 years. And I haven't had a drink or drug for 20 years, but all that did is bring out more of my PTSD. And because now I have to deal with it. So that's what I started going to the vet center here, and eventually I got a 100% rating, permanent and total, for post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm real appreciative of that because it takes a lot of stress off of me. You know, it's like it's enough money to where I'll always be able to have a house, I'll be able to have food and some gas for the car. I mean, if nothing else, I can live with the money I'm getting. I can, you know, maybe I might have to downsize or something, but I can live on it with my family. And that takes a lot of stress off of me.
Rick, what does the American flag mean and represent to you as a veteran?
Well, I fought for that flag, but you know, without getting into too much politics, the last 8 years I haven't flown it, I'll put it like that, because of who and what we all know. And it's a shame, you know, but I feel like eventually I can start flying my flag again because, you know, I'm from Kansas, a wasp, you know, and those things I was raised with, and learned to be proud of what I do and of my country, and it's just that I've lost that pride in the last few years. But the American flag means everything to me.
What do you think people should remember about Vietnam?
That it was totally unnecessary. Just like every other war, it's totally unnecessary. And if you read history, none of it had to happen. I mean, I just read this book, House of Wars, about the Pentagon. And the guy was a protester that wrote the book, and he also was a priest, and he also was the son of a very high official in the Pentagon, and he was practically raised in the Pentagon. I mean, he'd go to work with his dad, but he interviews, you know, Rumsfeld, all the political people, and from his standpoint, it's just like Japan. Japan was on the verge of surrendering anyway, and I believe Truman put the nuclear bomb into effect just to scare the Russians. And I don't think that was necessary to even drop those bombs. And it's just like every other war, there's no reason for it other than our American imperialism to, keep the supply and demand going. And it's, and you don't see their kids over there, and it's all about money. And sometimes I just like to sit in my backyard with my 4 dogs, smoke my cigar, drink my coffee, and I don't want to know anything anymore, because the more I learn, the more sickening it gets. And I have a real closeness with God now because of AA, and it's like this. I'm not religious. Religion is for people that believe in the devil, and spirituality is for those of us that have already been there or held to the devil. And I just, I wake up. I was taught to pray and meditate in AA, and I don't even have to do that anymore, because when I wake up, everything is one. Either everything makes sense or it doesn't make any sense. And that's the way I look at it. And to me, everything makes sense if you have the idea of oneness with God. And that oneness includes that glass table, which you look at with a small microscope, and it's moving. Everything's in motion. And all that motion, and I have this bracelet that says no beginning and no end. And so I don't feel I have to pray or meditate anymore, because I know, count the leaves in the tree, count the grains of sand. What are you going to do? So I chose to go with a higher power, as you might say, and as long as I make contact every day and just recognize, you're the one in charge, then it's like parking places open up, the lights are all green, it's just life goes smooth. But when you get in your own way, and that's what happened to me when I was drinking, is I was getting in my own way, and I was fighting it. And I feel like the prodigal son now,
One more question, then we're done.
Okay.
When you were in the heat of battle in Vietnam, and you were telling me these stories and all this stuff's happening, and you're wondering, how can this be? What got you through those times? Was it faith in God? Was it your training? Or obviously it was a matter of survival, but what got you through those times, and how did you cope with the stress over there?
Fear. You were constantly in fear, and
Fear got you through it, or
yeah, because what happens is when you go out, you're on full adrenaline, because you're using your nose, you're using your ears, you're using your eyes, because any second fire could come from anywhere. Because you don't know, because it's like going hunting in Kansas. You're out shooting going pheasant hunting. You're out there just walking along, but when you're over there, these pheasants shoot back. And they got to shoot at you first before you know they're the enemy. So, you're just out there making yourself available for death until you get through it for a year. But you're living on adrenaline, and you just can't. And it's constant fear, and that fear feeds the adrenaline feeds the fear, and your whole psyche is so out there, and I believe me, you become an animal. You know, I mean, because there's things I've done that I'm not proud of. But I didn't think I was coming home, you know. And I knew if I had to go through the second half of Vietnam, the same thing I went through the first half, because at halfway point I went on R&R to Bangkok. And if I had to go through the second half, some of the stuff I went to the front, I knew I wasn't coming home. So it's like you have a no give a shit attitude, survival, and whatever it takes, you know, whatever it takes. And that's what got me through is, you know, other than that, you got to be in reality. You got to handle and do the next thing in front of you. You know, and the minute you go wandering off with your mind somewhere over here or over here, you're going to get shot or you're going to get blown away. So it's just a constant, and like I say, you're living like that for a year, and then you come back here. Some of the guys still had Vietnam dirt under their fingernails sitting at the dinner table. They came home so fast. You know, we never had time to talk to anybody about it. You know, World War II guys, you know, when that war ended, they were still over there for probably 6 months before they started shipping them home. They had a chance to talk to each other and talk some of this out, and then they're on a boat and they have all that time to talk to somebody, and then they're, you know, come back here, and hell, they're even still having reunions today talking about it. But we didn't have that. We came home and were just put right in the street with a bunch of people that hated us. And, you know, and on top of that, you know, it's like I've heard stories of guys walking down alleys in New York with hundreds hanging out of their pocket just to get into trouble, you know. I mean, and that's what I drank and got in scrapes with the law. I was looking for that adrenaline rush, you know. I was looking for something to provide me for the way I was living for a year. And it's not there.
Well, a quick follow-up. But like at night in Vietnam, what were you thinking about? Were guys behind the enemy behind the front? Were they drinking? Were they doing drugs? How were they coping with the stress? Or just talking to each other?
Well, there was like some pot going on, and probably other stuff, but there wasn't much drinking going on. But I mean, at night we were on Hill 65. There was a battery of 155 artillery sitting there, and every time they had a mission, it raised you off your rack about a foot. You know, you never really slept for a year. I mean, lightly, but then you're either standing whole watch or you're waiting for somebody to wake you up at 3 in the morning to get you to go stand whole watch. And even though you know somebody's out there doing whole watch while you're trying to sleep, you know, you're laying there and all of a sudden, plunk, and you feel these little feet running out and then a rat's running across your goddamn head, you know? I mean, it's just, letters from home helped me a lot. And I would write the post office. I didn't care. I would write any and everybody just to get those letters, because that was one way to escape is to read those letters. And my training I took serious. And when I came back, I was a troop leader, and I told my guys, I trained 3-4 companies. And I told them, I said, I know all you can think about is going to LA and drinking and eating ice cream or whatever you want to do, but you better take this serious because it can save your life. And the will to live, you know, I think it was a combination of all those things and just pure ass luck, you know.
I'm going to ask you to do one more thing that I've asked all the veterans to do at the end of the interview. From where you're seated, because of the camera, I'm going to ask you to give me a salute into the camera when I tell you. Okay?
All right.
Okay, Rick, right in the camera. Great, thank you. Okay. Now stay there. I'm going to take a picture of us with this other camera, okay?
All right.